Sleep well? Long way to go today. Very short time to get there. We're going to go all the way up to 145 today. How's that? So I got to get between here and BWI. And I've already seen what a test that is for a 5 o'clock flight. So y'all get me out of here, all right? 30-minute lunch, can we do it? Chick-fil-A? All right, all you addicts. I think that Starbucks and Chick-fil-A put something in the stuff, right? They have to. Let's get started. You ready? Come on, you like it, you know. You are officially in LeaderLABS. Everything we do is built upon our benchmarks. It's research-oriented. Well, that's a new one for ministry, right? And yet, it objectifies, gives us specificity to what we need to be training. Last night we looked at leadership, and this is the reason. These are those 9 competencies. Out of 40 benchmarks across the Church of God over the past 3 years. This is the order in which they come and priority. But leadership is number 1. So last night we dealt with it. Today we will be dealing with it. Personal accountability, appreciating others, conflict management, developing and coaching, teamwork, diplomacy and intelligence, resilience, the bounce back quality. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. And time and priority management. Now, oftentimes, I will talk about certain things and not announce that I'm talking about it as a competency. But I want you to pick up on it, okay? Oh, that's one of those competencies. One of them that I won't get to spend a lot of time on in the 8 labs is time and priority management. It's number 9. But I am going to weave some stuff in and out for you, okay? And talk about some of this that will help you. Say time and priority management. Time and priority management. You cannot manage time. Time can't be managed. It's going at the same rate all the time. Even though it seems like it speeds up and slows down. Have you noticed that? Kind of weird, isn't it? Sometimes things are going so slow that it's like, oh my gosh, because you're bored. I hope that never happens here. Other times it's what we call the time flies rule. And it's like, oh my Lord, did we just go from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock? That's the way you felt last night. I hope. The time flies rule also gives you some idea as to what your passion and your purpose is, what your fit should be. Say fit. We've been talking a lot about that. That's one of the things that we're trying to get you to. We want every one of you to figure out your fit. Where do I fit? Because when you find out where you fit, it just flows. It's the round peg in the round hole. You ever heard it said that if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life? That's fit. They found their fit. On the other side of that, if you are doing something that you don't love, which, by the way, is typically because of one of 2 things. Either the person you're working for is horrible. They either have no character or no competence. You can't trust them, or they don't know what they're doing. And that's miserable. Or the other side of it is, you're in the wrong place. Because your strengths, say strengths, not your weaknesses. You don't, once you figure out what that is, all that does is helps you to be aware. Say aware. Self-awareness is the number 1 fundamental prerequisite for personal growth, development, Christian formation, and fit, self-awareness. So once you are aware of your weaknesses, that tells you where you don't need to be. And you don't spend any more time on that. But once you are aware of your strengths, that tells you exactly who you are and where you need to be. Now, sometimes you still need to dial it back. Or dial it up in certain situations. Why? Because your normal is not everybody else's normal. Say it. And if you don't get that, then you will be showing up. You will be presenting yourself in situations, and it's awkward for everyone but you. Because you don't get it. You don't see it. Let's hope you don't see it. Because if you see it, then we got other psychological issues, and I can recommend you to somebody. Because that just means you're just inconsiderate, you're mean, and you're egotistical and entitled, and probably verging on narcissistic. Ouch. But how many of you have ever met somebody that you say that's a pretty good look at what they are? Why? People don't leave organizations or churches, they leave people. So once you begin to understand how you're showing up, then it gives you some idea of how you need to adjust. Dial it back. And you know, dialing it back is pretty easy to see. You say, all right, I'm high on the chatty chat. Was it Margaret I met in the back there? Yes. Who was Margaret? Stand up back here, honey. I met her in about a nanosecond. I could diagnose her. What are you, Margaret? Chatty chat. Say chatty chat. I almost could not get away from Margaret. And I mean in a nanosecond. She had me hooked. She was going to sell me something if I stood back there any longer. And you know what she said? She said, you know what I am? And we said it in unison. Chatty chat. You can be seated. Let's give Margaret a hand. But it was her inspirational and charismatic vibe that really captured me. And I mean that, Margaret. You're a wonderful person. I would like to hang out with you. We would never get anything done. But we would really enjoy being with each other. Neither one of us would know what the other one had said. Because chatty chats are not listening. You got it? They're talking. But they love it. And they will walk away even though they don't have a clue about what you said, thinking you're the most wonderful, substantive person on the planet. Why? Because you allowed them to do their thing. But see, if you don't realize that, that's a problem. Because there's a lot of you that are thinking while chatty chat's talking that you can't wait to get away from them. Because this is driving you absolutely bonkers. It's very interesting to talk to some of you because many of you actually did marry your opposite. And you've been coming up to me and explaining that to me. Which I didn't need to have that explained to me. Once you said it, I can see it. But you are meant to complete each other, right? That's what that's for. You really did. Actually, subconsciously, you were looking for someone to complete you, to make you whole. The two shall become one. Did you know that the very first crisis of mankind was found in Genesis? And it was a crisis of loneliness. Everything God created was good. Until one day he walked up on Adam and he said, it was not good for man to be alone. So he created his opposite. And we've been fighting ever since. I'm kidding. Just a little bit. But isn't it something when you see that the very first crisis was loneliness, because we were created to be social people? And yet being with people is also the very thing that causes so much friction. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of stuff, and a lot of times I won't be mentioning the competencies, but I want you to keep this forever in the forefront of your imagination and mind, okay? Because this is my template for what I'm doing in this series. I'm talking about these things, and I'm going to be talking about other things because you have some outliers in Pennsylvania that's a little bit different than this, so we'll be also going there and touching on that. But I'm talking about these primarily because these are the in general that we all need as Church of God people trying to become the best version of ourselves. But let me just touch for a moment on number 9. Can I do it? Because you can't manage time, you have to manage you. That's it. Whether it's going fast or slow, the only person you can manage is you. Leadership development begins with self-development. Self-development begins with self-awareness. Self-awareness begins or leads you to self-control. Now you got that? Self-awareness should lead you to self-control, self-management, and self-leadership. Say self-management. When you think from now on about the fruits of the Spirit, I want you to think fundamentally and primarily about self-control. All of them are good. We probably need to spend more time talking about them, preaching on them, teaching on them to all of our Pentecostal culture, because they're fundamental. If we can get the fruits right, people might be more interested in the gifts. But oftentimes, people who spend so much time exercising the gifts are miserable at the fruits. Ouch. And so self-control, think of it as self-management. God has given us something special that the corporate world doesn't have. Something that we have an edge on everybody else. We're supposed to be able to control and manage ourselves, to lead ourselves. You can't be a good leader if you haven't learned to lead yourself. So you've got to learn to lead you. And that means leaders, remember, you push people out of their comfort zone. Well, you got to start by pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Because the reason why you're not reaching your potential right now is because over time you have allowed yourself to settle, and to plateau, and to reach status quo. And you have convinced yourself in between your own ears and that theater that's playing that movie that you wrote that this is okay. And it's not okay. If you want to be the best version of yourself. Why would you want to leave anything laying on the table when you take your last breath? On a scale of 1 to 10 right now, just draw a line somewhere on a piece of paper, or and just put 0 on the left and 10 on the right, 5's in the middle, and this is your life's potential. 10 is you milking it for everything you could have possibly been. Your potential. That's a 10. And I want you to put a star or a check somewhere on that line where you think you are right now. Now, some of you might not want to do it because you're so concerned that somebody left or right's going to look and see where you are. But I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. What do you think you're capable of? Now, take down the low self-esteem. And that's hard, isn't it? It's actually hard for most of us to think that we are actually capable of being a 10. Not my 10, your 10. And where are you right now? And at your age, at this place in life, where do you think you should be? Put an X on the line. Where do you think you should be right now? If you had moved forward at some progressive rate, where should you be? Where would you want to be when you take the last breath? When you leave this world, where would you want to be? Well, let's go ahead and say it. Now, let me show you. I hope that some of you put a star or a check mark at number 11, beyond the 10. Because this is what it means to be a Christian. It means you can be an overachiever. Because with God's favor, His anointing, call it what you want, that seed of potential on steroids that the Holy Spirit helps us with, this self-management, self-leadership, self-control fruit that is on the inside of us, if you interpret that appropriately and you look at everything the Bible has to say, then you should be an 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15 when you walk away from this world. Because He gives us the ability to model the way and to actually say to people, follow me as I follow Jesus. Because you're really being more than you're capable of already in my life. If anything happens to me, Josh, and you get a chance to say anything at my funeral, say this: he was an overachiever.
Amen.
I really believe that about me right now. I'm an overachiever. I would put an 11 out to the side right now at my place in life. That's not ego, because ego edges God out. And I'm not edging Him out. I am an 11 right now because of Him. Because I realized about 2 decades ago, 2.5 decades ago, that if I would manage me and lead me, push me out of my comfort zone, that I could be more than I ever dreamed. But it would take courage, it would take intentionality, and it would take hard work. But when those things come to play, God shows up in a very special way, ladies and gentlemen. And I can just say He's been showing up in my life in an unbelievable way. Because when I walked into a church of God for the very first time, see, I'm a product of the church of God. I didn't grow up in it. I'm what you people exist for, supposedly, to reach people like me. The problem is we've convinced ourselves that people like me are your enemy. But we're not your enemy. We're your target. And when I walked into a church of God for the first time, my hair was way down here, earrings, and tracks in my arms. Blue jeans. Oh, he's wearing blue jeans today. Oh man, this is my culture right here. January, freezing outside, silk t-shirt. And I thought these people were crazy, but I liked it. First time, now watch this, first time I had ever seen anything like that in my life. I didn't know that this kind of thing existed. It's the truth. And when I gave my heart to Jesus, it radically changed everything in my life. First person in my entire family, and I'm the baby of 8. And when I say entire family, I'm talking about in my genealogy. First one to graduate from high school. First one to get a degree from a college and university. Went to Lee University. Mother was dead. Sister shot to death in my front yard. Daddy died while I was at Lee. And I had nobody and nothing. And I graduated debt-free. Overachiever. Not because of me. And I did work 3 jobs. I washed dishes. I painted houses. And I cleaned homes. 4th job, I preached every weekend. And applied all the money to my college bill. And graduated debt-free. There are people with good parents that can pay that don't graduate from Lee University debt-free. And I did. Master of Divinity, PhD. And I didn't have the educational skills. When I got into Lee University, they let me in on probation. saying you don't have, well, my last report card just before I got saved had 7 zeros. In other words, you can't get any worse. Kicked out of the state of North Carolina, sent away for a year. I'm talking, my life was a mess. I was the person that your parents warned you about, literally. Don't hang out with him. First time my 2 best friends that were in the church let me show up on their front porch to spend the night, the mother would not open the screen door and said to them and my face while we all stood on the porch, "He ain't coming in my house." She ended up becoming a second mother to me. By the way, she's the one that first taught me to make my bed. Bobby, Rick, Freddie, you will not eat a piece of my bacon until you make your bed. And that rung in my heart and spirit for the rest of my life. Make your bed. And then I figured out that's a principle. The military teaches people this hands down. It's the only thing, the first thing every morning that you can really control. And it sets the stage for everything else that will happen that day. So you see, I'm an overachiever. I just gave you that little testimony. By the way, Lucky Number 8 is the book that I've written about my life. I'll try to bring some of those next time I come, okay? You can get it on Amazon.com for the same price. So if you want to give that to somebody or whatever, then get a hold of the book. Make sure it's my book. Look for my name, because there's another Lucky Number 8 that's about gambling in Vegas. One woman said, "I bought that too. I thought maybe from your background you wrote that one too." No, ma'am, did not. You see why I'm saying I'm an overachiever? But I'm not finished yet. God's not finished with me. I don't know where it's going, but I'm telling you, it's a wonderful journey. I love what I do. Can you tell it?
Oh, yes.
That's contagious, ladies and gentlemen. And so what I'm saying to you is, when you find out what your strength is, when you find out what you're good at, then and here's one of the rules. I said all that to say about time and priority management. The time flies rule. What are you doing when time is flying? Start paying attention. If when I'm teaching this, time is flying and it's like, golly, he just talked for 3 hours and I thought it was 15 minutes. That's amazing that could even happen. Because everything, see, that breaks every rule, doesn't it? Everything tells you 20, 30 minutes. And yet I know that I can sit in front of some people and I could say he or she could talk all day and I'd listen. Why? Because they're tapping into my time flies rule, which says they're tapping into who I am, what I like. What are you curious about? I'm giving you some really good stuff right here. You all write it down. What am I curious about? Well, I don't like to read. If you want me to be a lifelong learner, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm going to push you out of that comfort zone. Listen, you don't like to read because you've never found what you're curious about. Don't just listen to me. Find what you love. And when you tap into that, you buy more books than you ever dreamed. Books, magazines, podcasts. You'll go to seminars. You'll find it. Listen, it's not always about something spiritual and esoteric. You're more than that. God made you more than that. And that's you. That's part of you. Remember anybody ever remember Chariot of Fire or Chariots of Fire? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
The old movie. What's the music? You can still hear it. You can hear it right now, right? Come on. That's awful, but that's all right. You know why? That was all. It was the chatty chat-chats who don't mind trying anything. And I'm always tempted to try it, but my daughters told me, no, Dad, don't do that. That's all. But you got it. You can hear it in your mind. Did you know that that guy in the 40s, I think it was, for the Olympics, right, was a Christian? And the Christian world told him he could not run in the Olympics because sports and wearing shorts and everything like that was ungodly. It was worldly. Did you know that? You ought to watch the movie again, because in that movie, he goes to his girlfriend, who is his fiancée at the time, and he wants to be a missionary in China. And the missionary group that he works with says, if you run in the Olympics, you'll never go to China. Wow. And the movie shows a scene, and it's in his book, where he goes to his fiancée and tells her, I'm going to run in the Olympics. Oh, I get cold chills. You know why he told her he was going to run in the Olympics? He said, because God made me fast. And when I run, I feel His favor. I'm going to run. He won the gold. And he went to China as a missionary. Sometimes you don't have to have either or. But running was the way God made him. So what are you curious about? What's your passion? What is it that you love? What do you like to do outside of church? See, God made you to influence people, to enjoy life. I like to run. I've run 57 half marathons and 3 full marathons. One of them was the Boston Marathon. And I know it don't look like that. Just shows you what you can do if you decide to do it. I remember my mother-in-law saying, just think how big it'd be if you didn't run. That was supposed to be a compliment. I was like, what? But she did have a point, you know. But I love to run. I love to paint. God gave me a gift with art. Little, it goes back to when you were a child. You remember things you liked to do when you were a little child? From the earliest ages, I can remember, back then it was the Encyclopedia Britannica. Anybody remember this? Everybody owned at least one. If you didn't own any books, as soon as your family could get that whole set, you had it. How many had some in your house? They were good. Those were good salespeople, weren't they? And they walked around from house to house selling those things. And so that's how we learned. And I remember laying in the floor as a little boy with the Encyclopedia Britannica there and a piece of paper and pencil copying things out of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And the rest of my family, 7 brothers and sisters, much older than me, by the way, but they all would say things like, man, you're good. And I was. So that's a talent. You're born with it. So what are you born with? Some people are born with music, right? I mean, they literally sit down at the piano and they can do stuff that most people can't because it's in them. Mathematics. Usually people that are good with music are also good with mathematics because those things all fit together. Singing, their voice just is like beautiful. And these people make me sick. Because I'm not. That's called envy. Forgive me, Jesus. But you do it too. But see, to try and be them, that's just not you. Now, my daughters sing like crazy. I've got one daughter, Whitney, that is living in Orlando, and her husband, Nathan, work for Disney. They were here in New York City, and they were on Broadway for 9 years, and off-Broadway, and right in Harrisburg, and all these places, Sight and Sound. He was Joseph. So does that tell you anything? For years, he was Joseph. So he was the guy. And then Whitney sang in all the Christmas stuff and all the other theaters around town, and And they're now at Disney, And she's the soprano in Voices of Liberty. So it was Voices of Lee at Lee University, the soprano Danny Murray. And so she can sing, man. But I got passed over on that. She evidently got that from her mom. And she did, because my wife can knock it out. But you got to figure out what you're good at. I like to paint. For years, I laid that aside. And then 5 years ago, my wife said, can you paint me a picture for Christmas? She said, I want a big one to go over the fireplace. And so she showed me something. She said, something of the kid, you know, something that's wintry. And so I went and got a 4x4 frame. I mean, big. Told you I was a dreamer. And for the last 5 years, I've been painting. I've got like 11 or 12 of those 4x4 pictures. Now I'm just painting this big stuff. And I'm not great, but I'm pretty good. And I'm learning. But listen, when I'm painting, I feel His pleasure. And time flies. If I start painting at 8 o'clock in the morning, literally at 6, in our basement where my little art office is, Shirley will have to call me and say, you need to come up. And it's like, what time is it? I'm serious. Time flies. So I'm asking you, what is it you're doing when time flies? What are you curious about? I'm curious about the universe. I'm curious about everything that has to do with astronomy and the stars and the planets and travel to the planets, and I'm hoping that I live to see the day when we put people on Mars. I believe in my lifetime that we will go to Mars, and I'm excited about it. In fact, I would sign up to go if they'd let me, but they won't let me. So I read all these books. At Christmas, when you can't get me anything, my girls got me a National Geographic about the stars. And for 3 weeks, they said, Daddy's not even in the room, because I was reading that magazine about the stars. But you see, I connect that to God. I connect that to how awesome He is and how unbelievable this existence is, and that we are just some little speck in the universe. And as David said, oh, what is man that you're even mindful of him? Are you getting me? Yeah. You got to start figuring out what you love, what you're curious about, and what it is you're doing when time flies. And what did you do as a little boy or a little girl that you probably need to pick back up and do it again? And manage yourself. Well, I don't have time to do that. Well, make time. Say no to something else. Because every no is a yes to something better. Peter Drucker said, when you're teaching leaders, don't start by telling them what they should do. Help them understand what they should not be doing. Because our time and our calendars and our daily routines are full of stuff that we should not be doing. And when you prioritize, say time and what? Say priority. Those go together, time and priority management. You have to know your priorities, what you're curious about, what you love, what you're gifted at, what time flies when you're doing it, what your calling is, what your purpose is, and that's all about self-awareness that we've never even taken time to figure out. Duh! Really? And then you manage to put all that stuff into your day, and you have to say no to some other frivolous stuff. Other people can do that stuff, but that's not you. Show me your calendar and show me your checkbook, and I'll show you what you care about. Not what you should care about. Those are two different things. You understand that? I have yet to have anybody that will show me either one of those, actually. They're kind of like you. I don't want you to see my book. Right? Now you'll show it to me. You actually came up and showed it to me last night. Because I got you thinking. That's good. Leaders think. Say it out loud. Leaders think. Say it again. Leaders think. Leaders aren't afraid to think. For true leaders who want to be the best version of themselves, ignorance is not bliss. Feedback is a gift. Say it. Feedback is a gift. But in the church, we've turned that backward because we've gotten so much destructive criticism that when I heard that phrase for the first time, feedback is a gift, I said, not in my world. I said, many companies actually, will assign a devil's advocate to their council meetings, to their elders meetings, so that they'll pick it apart on purpose. And I had one pastor come up to me and say, we don't need to appoint a devil advocate. I've got self-appointed devils in my church. We laugh because if we didn't laugh, we'd cry. Because that's more true than we ever dreamed, right? I had one pastor say, is there a worse word than devil? Like Satan. Is there a worse world than Satan? Because they're in my church. That ought to get you to come out to Conflict Lab, right? We can help you with it. We have holy water. I'm going to sell everything. And splash it on people. Wouldn't that be great to go back after a lab and you come up to somebody and you start sprinkling water on them? Well, really be bad if they start sizzling when you do. Show me your time. Show me your calendar and your checkbook. Eleanor Roosevelt said it. Show me your calendar and show me your checkbook, and I'll show you what you care about. By the way, your budget should reflect your priorities. That's good for churches and it's good for individuals. What do I care about? What should I care about? What am I wasting my time on? So every no is a yes to something better. Time and priority management. This is the reason why I say if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. This is time and priority management. I know it doesn't sound like it, but it really is, because when you make your bed every morning, you're saying to yourself, I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. A lot of things might happen today. There's no telling what the day holds, right? And this is what the military teaches. But the one thing I have control over every morning is the first thing I do, my ugly frog, I make my bed. Because no matter what happens at the end of the day, I'm coming back to a bed that was ordered. And there's just something about the mindset, the mental model, that sets the stage and structures and orders your day when you start, instead of just walking away with everything just blah, and coming back to that. Are you with me? Yeah. Now you hear it, but most of us won't do anything about it. We just let that lay. But listen, that is just the very first part or variable in a routine that you need to begin your day with. There's a book you need to get. It's called Atomic Habits. Everybody needs to get it and read it before the next lab, and it'll revolutionize your world. And I'm serious. It's the best book I have ever read about relevant, practical ideas, best practices for getting your life ordered. Atomic means, little bitty thing, little atomic things, the nuclei, all of that. It's small things that can have an atomic, exponential impact on your life. And he tells you those things. You start your day with a certain routine. You need to fix that. Because, listen, I don't know you guys, but I'm just telling you in general, over 90% of people start their day with a bad routine. And it's just become the way they do things. By the way we do things around here is a definition of culture. The way we do things around here. And a church also has a culture. But it starts when a group of people attend or get in the same space over a period of time, and it creates an organizational culture. Just by the way they do things. And it starts at everybody's house when they start their morning. And you have to create new routines. But you can't create new routines unless you manage yourself and lead yourself. And remember, when you lead people, you lead them out of their comfort zone. So you have to lead yourself. You have to grab yourself by the back of the neck and say, self, make the bed. Every morning. Because, listen, there's going to be yourself, your heart in you will sabotage you. You are irresponsible at the core. Unless you're a C. Did you hear me now? Behavioral profile C, high. If you're 75 or above, you're anything but irresponsible. You're ADD when it comes to dotting I's. You probably were hitting the person beside you saying, I told you we shouldn't make it to bed. The C gets up and will make the bed with you in it. Why? Because you should have done been up. The C says to you while you are drinking your cup of coffee, trying to relax for just 3 minutes. I can't believe that you could sit there and drink that coffee. Why? Because the C has a list and started his or her list before you ever even became cognizant. Now you think I'm joking, but I'm not. That's the C. Okay, let me show you something here, right? You ready? You've been with me before, you probably know this, but right here is the best tool that you can ever have to order your life. Now some of you have your iPhone and you have this is a to-do list. And it's just a little spiral binder. You can get these for 20 cents. You can buy a whole pack of 10 of them. I had one pastor in Eastern North Carolina left at lunch, which you're not supposed to do, run to Walmart and bought 100 of these. He said, I'm giving one to every one of my leaders in my church as soon as I get back, because I believe that this could radically change people's lives. And he was right. It can. But you got to have a to-do list, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because you got to have a routine, and your routine needs to be structured. It needs to be prioritized. You need to know what you're going to do today. But I'm just telling you, most of you don't. You think you do, but you don't. You think about it a little bit because in your head you have a routine, but really, can I tell you what you're really doing? You're really living a que sera, sera life. Que sera, sera. Come on. Whatever will be, will be. Look at there. The future is not ours to see. Que sera, sera. Give yourself a hand. That wasn't bad, was it? Oh, come on. It's like, I'm not going to encourage that. See, my daughter said, Daddy, you can sing, you just have never been trained. Training has a lot to do with it, right? 1/3 of it's about innate talent. You're born with it. 2/3 of it in any aspect is you can learn it if you need to learn it. So this will help you to get out of the case of Rosser life. The night before, you jot down what you're supposed to be doing, and then you do it. What goes first on your list, ladies and gentlemen? Y'all get to graduate, I don't care how many you miss. You got it. You're right. My MIT, say MITs. MITs. My most important task.
Ugly frog first.
Who said that? Stay out of my preaching. That's good. Because you know what else you call an MIT? My ugly frogs. It's the same thing. You put your ugly frogs on your list first, and you kick yourself out of your comfort zone. That's what leaders do, remember? You tell yourself, I'm going to do this. And then you get her done. Y'all understand that from the South? Yeah. You get her done. You do that. I don't care. You make yourself do it. You create a persona inside of you that's not you. The heart is exceedingly deceitful. Where'd that come from? The Bible. You will sabotage you. You will tell you don't need to make the bed. But when you hear the deceitful you, dastardly, what do they call it? Dastardly, Dudley the Dastardly. Anybody ever remember him? He laid the girl on the train tracks, and he was always doing something mean. Well, you got one of those inside of you. And he and she, and if you're a lady, your dastardly has a mustache too, even though she's female. They're just mean. You're just mean to yourself. And you are lying to yourself about the fact you're lying to yourself, and your dastardly on the inside of you says, oh no, you don't have to make the bed this morning. But watch this. It's about your routine. Somebody say routines. Routines. You stack your habits. This is what Atomic Habits is. James Clear is going to tell you this. Stack your habits. Say it. And you begin by getting ready the next morning. You lay out your clothes the night before the next morning. You don't wait till tomorrow morning to figure it out. Some of you need to hear this. Because you already have enough decision-making issues. Right? So go through that, lay it out tomorrow because you think it through. What have I got to do first thing in the morning? Number one, some of you need to say this. What time do I need to get up in the mornings? And then set that as a routine. I'm going to get up at this particular time. Because pastoring sometimes, or being a staff member of a church sometimes, gives you so much discretion that you can stay up and watch Netflix until 3 in the morning and then sleep till 11. Did I just say that? But it's true. But you need to have a routine. Say, I need to have a routine. And a routine says to self, what are my limits? What are my boundaries? What do I need to do to be the best version of myself? How much can I watch and how many of a series? And I love watching it too. You know, I love watching stuff that I can watch. I enjoy getting involved in a good cliffhanging series myself. But I know that when I need to turn it off, and I turn it off, I say to self, turn it off. Go to sleep. And you tell yourself, you have to make yourself. Is this okay?
Yeah. Sure.
And so you stack your habits. What am I going to do? Well, I am going to get up. Now, you might have to go to the bathroom before you make your bed. That's okay. The older you get, you understand you got to do that. But one of the first things I'm doing is I'm making my bed. I want my grandchildren and my daughter, who have gone through a divorce this past year, rattled and shook our whole world, and they're now living with us. When they walk by my room in the mornings, I want to see that bed made. So I make it first thing. Bathroom, make my bed, take my medicine, go get my cup of coffee, sit down in my easy chair and think for a moment and look over my to-do list. What are my ugly frogs? What are my MITs? And what is it that I have got to get done today? And to be honest, some of it has what Shirley wants me to do on it. That better be an MIT, guys. I just helped your marriage right there. Literally, if she wants it done, you should put it on there. You need to get her done. You figure it out. And then all the other things that you need. And I'm talking, it don't need to be just spiritual stuff. It's just life stuff. Put air on the tire. Make sure the oil's changed on the car. It's got to be done. And listen, not only do I have this, but I have a calendar that sits on top of my desk in my bedroom and one in my office. It's a big, calendar. You can get it at Staples or something. And it's got those big squares on it. And that has my stuff on it too. So that I can look at it in a glance. And I can look at it 6 months down the road, because the bones, the things that happen that reoccur, birthdays, anniversaries, all sorts of things on that calendar. I'm ordering my private world. Does it sound like I'm ADD or something, that I'm, just compulsively out of control? No, this is normal, ladies and gentlemen. But it's abnormal for most of us. We are quesurize. Therefore, we're bouncing around from crises to crises, letting other people put their monkeys on our back, and by the time the day's over, we got everybody else's monkey, but we haven't done our monkey. Okay. You get it? That's time and priority management 101. It's 3 minutes till, you come back at 10 minutes after, and we're going to have some more fun. Come get your DVDs. Come on. Tell yourself, I gotta buy that. Change the world. Start by ordering your private world. Because you cannot help anyone if your own life is a mess. Now, when we come back, I'll talk to you about what happens when you are a high C and you are already using 40 different to-do lists. And that's driving you crazy. My daughter is that, and I had this conversation with her day before yesterday. She does her to-do list on her phone because I pulled mine out of my pocket. I said, honey, you need to have a to-do list just like this right here. She said, Daddy, don't talk to me about that stuff. I know what you teach. And she said, I do it. And I said, yeah, you got that from me, right? You got it naturally from me. And she said, yeah, I guess I did. She said, but my to-do list never stops. And that's the downside of being someone who naturally does it. Now, did you just hear me? If you're that C, not personality, but to a degree, I guess it would be personality, but your behavioral profile is naturally a high C. And you're the dot the I, cross the T, organized, rule, policy, procedure, all of that, and that's your normal. Then you also have the tendency to exaggerate that, to be obsessively compulsive about it. A tendency doesn't mean you always do, but you can. And remember what I said about behavior? You can dial it up and you can dial it back. Say dial it back. And that's where you have to learn to dial it back. And that's harder than you might think, but it's possible. It's just as possible for you to learn to dial it back as it is for a high D to dial it back. Because their natural tendency is to be extremely direct and straightforward. I live with one. And oftentimes, I'm bumping her foot underneath the table and saying, she knows what that means. It means, please. And I'll say on the way home, to my own detriment sometimes, by the way, because you're talking to a D, right? By the way, the natural emotion for a very high D, 80 or above, is anger. So you have to be able to dial that back. But if you don't know that, you think you're normal, everybody else is normal. And that everybody ought to, you could even excuse that because you think that that's okay. Look, this is what it says I am. That doesn't necessarily mean that that part of it's good. That means that's something you need to dial back. It can be good. We need some of that. But it can also show up in the wrong way. And so I'll say, honey, did you have to be that direct? And she will say something like this: we're all adults. Did I say anything wrong? Did I speak truth? I said, yes, you did. But could you put a little sugar with that? Now, when I'm talking, she's bumping me under the table. And I look down at the, underneath the table, and her finger's going. What's she say? Get to it, buddy. And she'll say, did you have to go around your elbow to get to your thumb? You could have said that right off the bat, and we could have enjoyed our lunch. But no, chat had to just talk. It is hilarious, isn't it? But how many of you know that I'm telling the truth? Now, I'm going to be evangelistic with it, of course, for effect, but we get the point. It is what we do. Why? Because D's think their normal is normal. And all I'm trying to say to you C's who are overly high on your C, and you get carried away with that, and that can drive you absolutely bonkers sometimes, like it does my daughter. And by the way, you're driving everybody else bonkers because it's driving you bonkers. And you know that, and you don't want to do that. But it's the same as the D, who's very high and who's very direct. Once you realize that, it's your responsibility to learn when to dial it back. That you can't be that direct all the time. In fact, about 75% of the time, you cannot be that direct. Because you're talking to an I, an S. Well, C's kind of like it that way. You can talk more to them because they pour out of the task bucket too. But when the D, who talks out of emotion, speaks to a C, the D needs to change it from emotion to statistics.
Amen.
That's a C. By the way, your behavioral profile, your assessment, the 64-page assessment, has 2 to 3 pages that says to you how you like to be communicated with and how you don't like to be communicated with. That's good stuff. And so C's want data and information. Give me the facts, There used to be an old black and white detective movie when I was growing up. And those two guys would come in and they had a statement that became memorialized. You might know what it is? What was it? Just the facts. Say it. When you're talking to a C, it's what? Just the facts. They don't care how you feel about it. By the way, let me say something to Pentecostals that we need to hear. You ready? And I is one. Emotions are poor custodians of truth. Yeah, I knew it had to sink in. Emotions are poor custodians of truth. Just because you feel good about it doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't even mean that it's true. Doesn't even mean that you should have felt good about it. Sometimes people say things that are absolutely not right. They're not even truthful. And we shout over it. Because it fit our bias, our prejudice, our expectation. So emotion is not a poor custodian, are very poor custodians of truth. You need to make sure that you're emotional about things you need to be emotional about. Therefore, lead yourself. Manage yourself. Okay? So, even I's, okay, and I'm trying to help the C's here. eyes have to dial it back too, because you've got to realize that when you're on the elevator and you've got everybody that's a captive audience, they really don't want to hear what you're thinking. Good morning, everybody. How are y'all today? Everybody else in there said, please, inside themselves. Am I right? I don't know you. Why in the world? By the way, and they're thinking this. They're thinking, you are way too happy. Am I right? So when you get in an elevator, dial it back. You don't have to do that. Be careful about how you're showing up. And S's, remember, you like it slow. How many of you have ever seen Zoology? Anybody ever seen it? It's a kids movie. You got kids? You've seen it? What's it called? Zootopia. Zoology. Oh, shut up. Both of them, they liked it way too much. People that correct people, I don't know. You're a C. Are you really? Okay. That's all right. Zootopia. Anybody seen the scene with the sloths in the scene? That is an S that's a 90 or above. It's funny because everybody's looking. Where am I? You know, the rabbit is an I. Chatty chat chat, loves it fast, optimistic, wants it now, please. Runs in to the, number one, goes into the license bureau. You want to get a tag or registration or something, you don't need to go in there and want anything fast. Am I right? Because they got this stereotype perfect. So the rabbit runs in there and wants something, throws it up there on the counter, and every clerk is a sloth. And says, I want such and such, and the sloth goes. Okay. And the rabbit already is going. Rabbit's going crazy. Because the rabbit's normal is not the sloth's normal, and the sloth don't give a hoot whether or not it's normal. Because the sloth don't have another speed. And that's the S. The S just likes life slow. Now that might be an exaggeration, honestly, but it sure starts getting the point across. But sometimes the S has to adapt, the S has to dial it back, which means dial it up, really. Move a little bit quicker, because 75% of the other people want you to move a little bit quicker. You see what I'm saying? So when I say dial it up and dial it back, whichever one of those you need to do in a situation, that's where you lead yourself. That's where you have to adjust through discipline and training over time to realize that I don't have to obsess over this. And that doesn't happen overnight. There's no pill, there's no magic wand, there's no silver bullet. Boy, I wish there was. But you can do it. And it takes a little bit of time. But I will address that next month when we get there just a little bit better, okay? So, silence phone, take pictures, train the trainer. Some of you are talking about this. If you don't invest in you, nobody is. If you think you want to be a trainer, that you want to do the kind of thing I am at the church level, local church level, or at the state, or that you ever might want to be a trainer or someone that does this kind of stuff, human resource development, person at your job, whatever the case may be, then you need to think about this, because I'll give you a lot of insight. If you don't invest in you, nobody will. So you have to invest. And I'm looking for people who already have the propensity toward this. You've already had John Maxwell training. You've already went to some other kind of training. You are a human resource development person in your office or in your day job. or you already like the teach aspect of ministry, not just preach, but you want to teach, and you already think about a certain niche, like children or youth or couples, and you can see where doing this in that niche, you would have a place. And so one of the things that you need to start doing right now, you're going to live 20 to 30 years longer than you ever dreamed you were, unless you have an accident or you die of a disease. Medical technology is advancing so rapidly that all of us are already living longer than any generation of humans ever dreamed possible. And so what are you going to do with the second adulthood? What are you going to do with that extra 20 to 30 years? You cannot wait until 62, 64, 67 to figure that out. You have to start preparing for a parallel job and life. And typically when you get to 62, 64, 67, and you want to think about retirement, too many people in ministry did not prepare for it. They were expecting Jesus to come back, number one, and he didn't. That's the truth. Now he's coming. We just don't know when. And you need to live your life in expectation as if it's going to be another 1,000 years. The signs are very different, but we don't know, right? So you need to prepare for an eventuality you don't know is going to happen. Man, that right there was good. You need to be preparing for an eventuality you don't know is going to happen. You need to get all you can and can all you can get. You need to get as much education. People say to me all the time, I'm too old, I can't get my GED, I can't get my diploma, college diploma, I can't get my master's, I can't get my PhD or doctorate of ministry. Yes, you can. Quit letting yourself say that to you. Do you hear me? That's dastardly, doubly talking to you. That is you sabotaging you.
That's right.
The largest group of people going back to get a PhD today or a master's degree are women in their 50s.
Hallelujah. Amen, brother.
By hundreds of thousands. Women are busting the glass ceiling right now like we never ever thought they would.
Absolutely.
In every race, creed, color, and definition, women are getting it. And they're learning that education is a huge part of it.
Amen.
And so I'm telling you, go get all the education you can. You will be glad. Because when you get to retirement, Social Security is not going to take care of you. It'll be part of it, we hope, right? It'll be one part, but you're going to need multiple sources of income. Say that. And if you like the kind of stuff I'm doing, why not go ahead and put that in your hip pocket as start getting training? I'm not all of it. I'm just part of it, right? So I'm just saying, whether it's this, that, or the other, you need to start preparing for that second adulthood sometime. The best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The next best time is when? Right now. Right now. So, but that's your development plan. From this day on, these two labs, this weekend, you have to start writing your own development plan. I'm going to give you all sorts of ideas. I'm going to give you all kinds of resources, everything. And you're starting to give me some. You're starting to give me books. You're starting to tell me about things you bumped into. Text me those things. Email me those things. When you text me and email me, remember, I will not read your epistle. Did you hear what I just said? No, we'll make it short. Don't go on and on and on and on and on and on. Your normal's not my normal. So just give me the Cliff Notes version. And if I want to know more, I can contact you, right? But give me those resources. Some of the best resources and ideas I get are from people like you. Already some of you have written books and you're bringing those to me. And I love what you're telling me. And I'm going to start using these in my labs and recommending them. Bobby, stand up, please. I just read her table of contents, but listen what she's already written. She wrote 3 books during COVID-19. 3 books. I I would say, and this is Pennsylvania, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, no silos anymore. Collaboration and teamwork will be the meta skill of the 21st century. I would find out more about Bobby and their ministry, their theater ministry, all the stuff that they're doing to reach outside the four walls of their church. I found this out in just one little sentence or two that she gave me, and life intentionally. Man, if that don't make you want to just read this, it's a little workbook about how to live life intention. You got more of these? Can they get them for you? Come on, let's give her a hand, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be promoting that everywhere. It will be read before I get back to Tennessee. And it's that kind of read. I think I can read it and start applying in my own life. And then, because I'm going to look first to find out what in that book I need. And then I'm going to say, what can I do to share it with other people? Okay? See, that's super leadership. We're not in this by ourselves. We have to help each other. We have to help others. How many people in your church you know that need a lot of this stuff we're talking about right now? See, one of the best things you can do for the people in your church is go back and start a class on how to handle money and how to use a budget. Well, what's the name of the great series that's out there on how to do? Say it.
Financial peace.
Financial peace. Every church ought to have that as a small group and ought to have it as an ongoing class continually. We want people to tithe and give, but they don't know how to deal with their money. And it's not taught. It should be, but it's not. All the things you wish seminary would have taught you, Bible school would have taught you, college would have taught you, that did not teach you, you need to teach that in your church. Because your people have got to learn to be responsible, accountable, and if you never teach them those kind of real life skills, they'll never be the best versions of themselves. And I believe that stuff's spiritual.
Yes.
Okay, let's go. You ready? Here we go. Let's talk about resilience. Now, when we talk about resilience, let's go back here just a minute. And let's see. Look on there. Where is resilience? It's number 8, okay? So again, I'm not going to do this every time. I can't go back. It would take me all day. But I want you to see that I'm trying to touch base with leadership stuff right now. Because leadership is not one skill. Leadership is a collection of skills. And I want to start by talking to you about resilience, because resilience is called the bounce back competency. The Bible talks about it in so many different ways, and it needs to be preached. And remember, competencies can be taught and they can be learned. Maybe 1/3 of it might be natural, that certain people bounce back quicker than others, right? But 2/3 of it can be taught. And that's the same with any competency. So 66% of it is, you do it. But you have to execute on it. You have to adapt it into your own life, all right? And so you have to do that. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. That's another term for resilience, to be tough. You ever seen that? My little grandson's 3 years old, and he come running in. If he falls, the first thing we say, "You're tough." He'll stand up and go, "I'm tough." It's really weird because it calls him to quit crying and everything. He just says, "I'm tough." And he gets it. What's he doing? Bouncing back from the pain. Realizing that it hurt, yeah, but if you let you go, you just cry the rest of the day. That's the comfort zone that you need to pull yourself out of. And we need to help people be tough to bounce back. The ability to mentally or emotionally or spiritually cope with a crisis or to return to pre-crisis status quickly. And if there's ever been a time when we need to return to pre-crisis status, it's right now. We need to be able to recover. And if the research is correct, it says that all organizations are gearing up for an era of constant crises, then you're going to have to feel the pain and get over it quick. Stand up and say, "I'm tough." And what I mean by that is inside of you. Let that persona of the warrior, full armored, stand up and say, "I'm tough." And start hanging out with other people that are tough. not people that are wimps. Hang out with people that are tough, that understand it. They hurt too, but they get over it. You ever said to somebody, get over it? Sometimes you need to say to yourself, get over it. I can't keep doing this. Well, this guy, anything he writes, again, is awesome. Edwin Friedman. He's a Jewish rabbi, an ordained rabbi, but he's also a leadership consultant, and his books are on the best-selling list. He's no longer with us, but anything that he has written, then you need to get from Edwin Friedman. Now, listen to what he has to say, and let me unpack it a little bit for you. They, talking about people who were leaders, but stepped out of the arena for some reason. He's going to start, I'm going to share with you some ideas of people who have made these observations, of people who were leaders, but they stepped out into the cheap seats again. And they're starting to tell us why this happened on a wholesale manner around the world. They had become so focused on the aches and pains in the system that they had been thrown off course by the complaints. Man, where do we ever hear that? That's just truth. And now he's talking fundamentally about corporate world globally, but as a rabbi, he also includes the church in this, the faith community. And I want you to read that again, and I want you to think about in the ministry as a Christian. They had become so focused on the aches and pains. Remember, that's falling. That's experiencing the trauma and the shock of the crisis. And that's hurting, that's crying, that's being sucker punched. You weren't expecting it, and it hurts. And so you experience the aches and pains, and they had been thrown off by the complaints. When crises happens, all you hear are complaints. And if you're the pastor, if you're the leader, if you're the department head, if you're in the church, you are the complaint board. They are constantly complaining to you. I had a rule at my church, and I said, don't bring me your complaints on Sunday. I told them all this in my fireside chat once a year on a Sunday night. I said, don't bring me complaints on Sunday. And then I unpacked that. I said, because there's a good reason. I want to be a dealer of hope. I want to give the good news. And when everybody shows up, your complaints are important to me. Your crises are important to me. Now, if it's a death, if it's a sickness or disease, an accident, those kind of outliers or real crises, I understand that. We'll deal with that. Right? I'll even leave church for that. Give it to one of my staff for that. But on any other thing, don't bring it to me on Sunday. Because I'm focused on doing one thing. I think the whole team ought to be focused on doing one thing on Sunday. We're dealers of hope. We set an atmosphere. Remember, soil is important. Hope is the soil from which potential grows. And people can sense that culture, the way we do things around here. If all they hear is people complaining. We want an atmosphere and a culture of hope. Say that. Okay? But if all you hear are the complaints. Now, I also would tell them, don't bring them to me on Monday either. Now, you need to explain that. Because there's a lot of people that attend our church that haven't attended a fireside chat, and they don't know that principle. So they're bringing their stuff to me, and Monday morning I'm ready to resign anyway. So give me till Tuesday and line up. But Monday and Sunday. Does that make sense? Yeah. But what he's saying is the aches and pains of the client. They have stopped supplying vision. Say vision. Vision is a key component to leadership. Remember, leaders cast vision. They lead change. And if you're not casting vision, even in your department, dreaming of the future, being forward-looking, right? Somebody else is. Did you hear me? If you're not casting vision, someone else is. There's always a Diotrephes among you that loveth to have the preeminence among you. and they will cast vision. Your vision needs to be shared vision with the community, talked over a period of time so that they feel ownership of it. It's not just your vision, it's shared vision. Say shared vision. Shared. Because we are a community. We are the body of Christ. Body. Right? No one ever said that the pastor was the head and the most important person in the church. Pastor's one person in the church. By the way, the pastor and all the leadership should be the number one people serving the rest of the body. Serving the rest of the body. And so they had stopped supplying vision or had burned out fighting the resistance. That's crazy because we're called to lead the very people that are our resistance. No one dislikes change more than church people. See, y'all know this. Nobody will ever say that. I just said it publicly. No one dislikes change more than church people. You know, there's a reason we call it a sanctuary. But over time, the sanctuary becomes the main thing. And we forget that the sanctuary was supposed to knock down its walls and be missional. And if we're not missional, we lost the very reason for being. They had stopped supplying vision. Why? And it was because of the aches and pains. They lost focus. They were thrown off course by all the complaints. They stopped supplying vision or burned out fighting the resistance. They had ceased to be the strength in the system. In short, they had forgotten to lead. Isn't that great? That's just unbelievable insight from someone who's a rabbi, someone who understands our faith and culture, right? Edward Friedman is there. There we go. Sabotage. Now, this is a great book right here that I suggest, A Failure of Nerve. Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. Well, that describes it, doesn't it? And so here's what he says. Sabotage comes with the territory of leading. A leader's capacity to recognize sabotage for what it is the key to the kingdom. Listen, the resistance. The resistance is right among it. It would be different if the resistance was out there at Burger King and the organization down the road, you know, just the people out there in politics and in the world. No, they're going on with life. They could really care less. But the resistance is right there in the church. And those folks will sabotage you. Not everybody, but remember, it only takes in a church of 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and they can blow you right out of the water. So sabotage comes with the territory, and according to him, the ability to recognize it is the key. One of today's most needed and critical leadership attributes is persistence. Say persistence. In the face of resistance and rejection. This is the reason why I say that the church is the hope of the world. There's that word hope again. Do you believe that? Healthy leaders are the hope of the church. Someone said to me when their state was considering doing LeaderLABS 3.0 and they were talking to me on Zoom, and one of their elders asked me, said, can you give us statistics as to how much this will help our church and our state grow? Is there a precedence? And my answer was, you just missed everything that LeaderLABS 3.0 is all about. Because it's not about church growth. It's about leadership health. We bypassed leadership health trying to get to church growth. We have got to have healthy leaders. Say healthy leaders. Now, I do believe that if you experience this journey, I believe that healthy leaders have more of a chance of growing healthy churches. So it is a default result and product if we can get healthy leaders. Anybody with me?
Yes.
But let's not get the cart before the horse and try to grow a church before we grow you.
Yes.
Because you're the lead. And people can't grow beyond you. It's going to take persistence. Leaders today must develop the reliance. It's supposed to be resilience. Don't say it. Resilience and adaptive capacity to get through the resistance and sabotage of relationships. Say sabotage of relationships. If you've been in the ministry longer than a month, you've had a relationship sabotaged. If you've been alive, if you're breathing, someone has sabotaged a relationship in your life and it hurts. How many of you have ever been betrayed by a friend? That hurts, doesn't it? This is what they're talking about. A sabotage, right? Here's Todd Bolsinger, Tempered Resilience. This is the one that the state's giving to all the pastors. If you don't get it, you need to get it yourself. Todd Bolsinger, Fuller Theological Seminary, he's the one that will be speaking at my conference on March 28 and 29 from Fuller. And we'll have the videos available on April 11th. He said, no matter the group, over and over again, he's heard the same message. He gets to travel North America to thousands of different venues, all evangelical Christianity. Listen, I don't think I can find anyone in the entire country to lead the kind of changes you're talking about. These are seminary presidents, denominational leaders coming up and talking to him, and that's what they're saying to him. Because he's saying that the iceberg is melting, that we're in a time of where adaptive leadership is needed. We have to lead again. We can't continue to manage. The church has got to have leaders. We've got to lead change because that's what leaders do. They cast vision and they lead change. You with me? And then he's hearing over and over and over, I don't know where we're going to find people who can lead these changes. And then look at this. This was a pastor's confession. The question I find myself asking is not, can I lead or can I learn the skills I need to lead change? Can I survive it? Because he knows that he hears this stuff like we're talking about here, but he or she, they've got to go back to that church and try to lead this. And when you lead change, you're pushing people out of their comfort zone. But ladies and gentlemen, in this season, we need Issachar leaders who understand the times and know what the church should do, and we've got to have leaders. And the Lord is with us. The church can adapt. The church can do this. Here it is again. The single greatest weakness. Now this is him speaking from a 5,000-foot look down at the church. Todd Bolsinger. The single greatest weakness in the church today may be not being able to lead in the face of resistance and sabotage. What's he saying? What he's not saying is very, very important here. What he's saying is you go back and try to lead this stuff, not only will you feel pushback and resistance, but a few people will literally try to take you out. Listen, he talks and he says this. He says, one 80-year-old lady came up to him, he said, and I think she had the blanket statement, not only for the group he was talking to, which was a group of senior adults and citizens at some senior adult deal convention, he said, but really for the whole church. Here's what she literally said to him. Now, Brother Todd, I know that the church needs to change. That is evident. But listen, people like me will be gone in about 10, 15 years. Would you just hold off and let us leave? He said a person actually said that to him. And if truth be known, you know this and I know this, there are people sitting in our congregations that feel that way. But we've got to push them out of that comfort zone and a lot of it has to do with giving them the right information, and I think it starts with asking them a question like, how many of you love your kids and your grandbabies and your great-grandbabies? How many of you want them to believe in Jesus? And how many of you want them to be Christian? Then you got to change. You got to let me lead change. Together, we've got to change, or we won't have that. Say it out loud. Now, what it didn't say is if you're a manager. And that's the reason why we go back to the cheat sheets. We've learned that we can manage, keep the sanctuary. Don't ask them to be anything outside the four walls. Just come inside here on Sundays and whatever little small group and get inoculated from the world. Get your emotional hit and just keep going right on. That's not going to work anymore, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I believe there's a purge taking place. And I believe that the Lord might just be behind it, because He's pushing us out of our comfort zones, because He knows what's coming. And the church today won't survive it. But He knows that we can survive it. Not only can we survive it, we can thrive in it as warriors. The church can become something that it's not been for the last 100 years. Something that impacts society and the world with hope, with conviction, with belief, with a systematic presentation and understanding of the truth that matters. That's doctrine. We can do this. Crises. If, as the research says, that we are now in an era of time where crises will be constant, we will move from one crisis to another, then we've got to be resilient, right? We've got to have perseverance. We've got to be able to adapt, to bounce back. Over on this left-hand side here, we've got failure of nerve. Say failure of nerve. This is Edwin Friedman's term. Failure of nerve. Then on the other side of it, we've got failure of heart. This is Todd Bolsinger's term for it. Failure of heart. Now, failure of nerve is caving to the pressure of the status quo. That's what's happened over the last 50, 60 years. We in the ministry, and remember, John Cotter, Warren Bennis, those professors and academics and those in the corporate world said it's not just an issue in the church. Managers, having more managers is even hurting the corporate world. We need leaders. And here's the reason. Because of failure of nerve, caving to the pressure of the status quo, the resistance, the sabotage. It's easier to just manage this thing. It's safer. I don't get as bloody. Remember the guy sitting in the corner going. But then on the other hand, Todd Bolsinger says failure of heart is walking away and quitting. And we have an epidemic of ministers walking away from the ministry. More today than ever before in history. I'm just telling you the reality of it. No one wants to tell us the truth. But the reality is, Joseph Umidi at Regent University, who studies this stuff, says as many as 50,000 a year walk away never to return. Others say it's about 1,500 a month. But you figure that out, extrapolate it out over, the C's have already done the math. Times 12, and these figure, it's still a lot of people in the ministry that are walking away. And that doesn't count collateral deaths or silent deaths. In other words, that doesn't count kids, PKs, grandbabies, wives, husbands, that are, when they throw a grenade in the room trying to get the pastor, they also get a lot of other people. Right? It's an issue. And it makes you wonder why we haven't been given better conflict management strategies and training in the church, because it is a problem. But we can do this. The corporate world figured it out. You can create conflict-positive environments if you know how to get out ahead of it. But we've never even been taught this stuff. So we're going to teach you this stuff later and try to help us. So failure of nerve or failure of heart. A resilient system or a resilient person can reconfigure themselves continuously. Now this is important. You've got to be able to reconfigure. When you get back up, remember you can be knocked down, but you got to get back up. That's resilience. You get back up, the warrior says, get up. And you get up.
Yes.
And you say, I'm tough. And you are tough. You're tougher than you realize. And the Holy Spirit's in you. You can get up. And people are watching you, for heaven's sakes. You're saying to them, should be saying, follow me as I follow Christ. When you get hit, be vulnerable enough to say, I got hit too. I'm tough. And you need to be tough. And so we reconfigure ourselves and fluidly in order to adapt to ever-changing circumstances while continuing to fulfill your purpose. Question, how do we do this without violating our core values of our biblical identity? Todd Bolsinger says that the greatest issue today is the issue of conflicting values. It doesn't matter what definition you give anything today, somebody's going to be mad at you. Am I right? Yes. So many issues, and part of it's the fact that we have 5 or 6 generations living right now, and there's never been an era in the history of humanity where 5 or 6 generations were alive at one time. But this also should be a sign of the times. Remember, we understood the seasons. And we knew what the church should do. Why is it that the Lord has allowed there to be 5 or 6 generations alive right now? You can tell the weather, but you can't tell the signs. Look around, see what's happening. Know that things are happening on purpose. And so we're beginning to wonder, what are our core values? What are the bones of Joseph? What of our past has to go into the future with us? And that's going to take some serious thinking and collaboration. Leaders think. Say it. Leaders think. And they talk to each other, ladies and gentlemen. Conversational capacity. We need to meet together more like this. Once you have decided what will never change, read that bottom sentence. Say all of it out loud. Once you... You know that's the truth. But none of us wants to hear it. And not one of us wants to go back and tell that to the church Sunday. Because we're in a comfort zone. Could that be the reason why the Barna Group, George Barna, Nashville, largest Christian research organization on the planet right now, he says that 85% of the evangelical church in North America is plateaued. Not growing, not advancing, plateaued. That's 8.5 out of 10 churches. But that isn't all he said. Plateaued or dying. How serious is this thing of being managers and just allowing the status quo to settle in? Now, I believe, here's my eye, I'm optimistic, remember. I'm optimistic, I'm trusting, but I believe this. I really believe that God's in this, and I really believe that most of our people can make the shift. We've got to do it gradually. We've got to do it incrementally. We've got to have this kind of training. We've got to know how to lead change, how to get out ahead of it. We've got to know that we need to do it. We've got to know that it's going to be uncomfortable to do it. And we've got to have partners who we can get with and share our feelings, our emotions, and our pain and the criticisms so that we can encourage one another by saying, you can do this, you're tough. Why? Because we got on the whole armor of God. We've been called to be warriors, ladies and gentlemen. Not people in the cheap seats. We're supposed to be gladiators. The gates of hell shall not prevail. What does that mean? That the gates of hell are storming us? You know that. You've heard this preached forever, right? What does it mean? That the gates of hell will not stand up against our onslaught. That's a whole different church. That takes a whole different kind of mentality, an entirely different kind of Christian formation and leadership development attitude, a whole different mental model that they can be much better than they are. So you got to figure out, where are they? And where do they need to go? And how am I going to get them there? And what price am I willing to pay to help them get there? Say it out loud. Say it again. So here's resilience. The capacity to recover quickly from the difficulties, its toughness. The ability to mentally, emotionally, spiritually cope with a crisis and to return to pre-crisis status quickly. This is resilience. This is the bounce back quality. Okay? Here we go. You got 10 minutes to do all that talking you want to do right after Josh. I'm good. The Department of Education is doing. This is leadership in ministry, and it's a course that is on DOE. They had the executive committee and the department commission need to do 3 video series on leadership. That hopefully tells you how hot this stuff is. That people are saying we need more of this. So they wanted me to be able to do this. So I did this, and this is one of the first ones. I think it's like 9 of these. If you like this, then you'll like that. And those are there for you, but also for the church. So you can play this at the church for small groups and to do development. And I've got 4 DVDs left. So it's like a first come, first served kind of thing. So get these. I don't want to go home. Somebody needs to grab these and get them for yourself or for your church, and then I'll bring 10 more the next time until everybody gets one. Okay? But you need to get a hold of that. Also, T for T, training for trainers. Those of you that are coming up to me and are talking about that, if you like this kind of stuff, you just need to be there. You have to make applications. So go on my website. There's a lot of stuff on my website you can take advantage of. But it's training for trainers. See the brochure, you click on that, and then it takes you to a page that tells you all the details, and then there's a little red comment that says you have to be accepted. You have to make application. You click on that, and it takes you to a Google form. You just answer the questions, and that sends that Google form to me. I just want to know a little bit about who it is I'm accepting into the program, right? And then within 24, 48 hours, because I'm out doing this stuff, I'll find it, and you will get a formal acceptance letter in the email. Your seat is not held until you pay your $100 deposit. And then once you do that, then you're held. And I'm telling you, if you want to do this, you need to get in now, because it's filling up. It's over half full. I've been advertising for 2 weeks. And so you do have to come to Cleveland. You do have to come the whole week. Sorry, you can't do this online because I have to be able to look at you. I have to be able to talk to you. I want to get to know you. I want to pour myself into you. I want to get to know you. I want to know who it is I'm endorsing and what you do and this kind of thing. So we just have to reproduce ourselves. But I want as many of you to be there as possible. Here's one of the great things. Kip, stand up for a minute, please. Right here's a person on your state council here in Pennsylvania. He's also the lead of your MIP program, and that trains all your ministers. He's coming to the training for trainers. Listen, we have to get this institutionalized in Pennsylvania. And I mean that in the healthiest sense of the word. Why would we want to do all this research and all this work and find out all this stuff not to give it to those that are coming into ministry? Right? We need to take them out of the deep end of the pool immediately and share with them. And so we need people like Kip coming down there and getting trained so we can bring it back and keep it in Pennsylvania. Let's give him a hand. Thank you for what you do. Extremely important. So get involved. And again, during the next break, we'll do one more break before we leave today. But I'll be glad to answer any questions and get rid of these videos for you. We are taking credit cards now because Josh is Mr. Technology and he helped me know how to do that. Remember, we can't do it alone, right? We're in this thing together. Okay, at this table, we got into an incredibly important discussion. Where's the other gentleman? Where is he? Stand up back there. Avon asked me a great question about it. He said we do a great job with creating preachers in the Church of God. But this kind of stuff we haven't done so good at. Would you agree? Yes. We have some of the best preachers anywhere, hands down. But we need this kind of training, right? And the reason why we're doing this is because this is the stuff, remember, everything I'm teaching is the stuff I didn't get at Lee Bible School. I didn't get this at the seminary. And I love all of them. You know, I teach at Lee. I've taught at the seminary for 17 years. I've taught at Regent University at the doctoral level. But it was not until I got to Regent University that I started getting this stuff. And I said, where in the world has this stuff been? Because we needed this in the ministry. So this is the kind of stuff that we need. So we've got to all share this. And Avon was talking about that. So I connected Avon. And here, Kip, sorry, buddy. But I said to Avon, I said, where's your MIP director? They should be here. And then I was sitting at this table and somebody said, well, he is our MIP director. And the MIP director, before I said anything, he said, I'm thinking about coming to training for trainers. And that's when I started hollering, Avon! Avon! Come here. Because life's about making connections, right? And so the MIP director needed to hear Avon's heart. And he did get to hear Avon's heart. And I think you've already got that part. So it's like preaching to the choir. But it sure helps to hear it, right? That we need to do this. Now what happens? What happens when the executive committee don't mandate this stuff, but out here from city to city, state to state, MIP directors and all these Church of God people are being garmentized. Now I don't mean that about me, but I'm talking about we're building this culture that says we all need to develop better leaders. And that people are getting trained, people are taking this stuff back. Even our disc that we use in MIP is a good disc, but we need to know how to unpack it better. And that's what we're going to learn next time, is how to take that. I tell them that they come up to me all the time, and you probably would too at some point, do I need to trade my assessment? No, not necessarily, because that's probably cheaper than this one. But at the same time, you might. But at the same, I would say, no, just learn how to unpack it better and use some of these tools to unpack it, and it'll be better at that level. But once we do this, how many believe that we can start a revolution that truly does change leadership in the Church of God from the grassroots up? You know, the Special Forces have a thing called managing upward. Say it. And that means that you, at your level, are responsible not only for giving people below you the right information, but you can also help the people above you lead by encouraging them and giving them the right information. And so you manage up. And so let's continue to do that at a grassroots level and continue to grow our leadership. So Avon, thank you for your input. Kip, thank you for being the leader that you are, a super leader, because you're reproducing people all the time. Now, there was another individual that came over here. Where are you? Because you sat at this table with me. Come on. Right back there. Stand up. Now, tell me your first name again.
Matthew.
Matthew? Okay. I should know that, Matthew. I'm sorry. But I forget. No. Stand up. Because Matthew wanted to know about resilience. And so did the rest of the table once we got into it, because y'all were eavesdropping, right? And they got in on it. So we talked about resilience. Thank you. I'm going to address that real quick. It's okay? So he asked me about resilience And I wish I had a whiteboard up here because I would draw you this bell curve, right? That looks just like the normal bell curve. And I would say for resilience goes through a cycle. It's cyclical. And so what happens with resilience, to be resilient, you have to have a crisis, whatever that might be. COVID-19, March 2020 was a crisis, one like we've never known before in our generation. Now, it's not the only time humanity has gone through something like that. There have been other times when there were global crises as well, pandemics that happened, serious problems where people were dying globally. So this has happened before. It just hasn't happened in our time. So we experienced a global pandemic, and it hit us as a true global crisis. Now, crises happen from different levels at different things, but let's just think about COVID-19, March 2020, and then let's think about it at a personal level. Let's say the death of a loved one or a divorce. I never knew, I've heard about it, I've helped people through it for 40 years that I've been in ministry, 42 now. Can you believe that? But I never really caught a good glimpse of it until my daughter last year has gone through a divorce. Her husband walked out on her and 2 girls in the middle of COVID-19. And she moved in with us at 38 years old, professor at University of Tennessee in nursing, 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and for the last year, we've been going through that with her. That's a crisis for everybody. So whether it's the death of a loved one, a crisis of a divorce, I mean, it really hurts, right? You're devastated. So when you think about it being a cycle, then what really happens is, you know, your life's going along pretty well, you're advancing, and then boom, crisis happens. And that first part of that cycle, or that bell curve, is what you call shock. It's shock. It's when you first get the news, or you realize that, oh my God, something bad's happened, right? And you're shocked. Now, shock, you don't feel it as much initially because adrenaline kicks in. The evolutionary process, God created us in such a way where adrenaline would kick in, and it helps you through those preliminary moments. You're so busy, that's pumping in your veins, and that's intended to help you make decisions and to do things at that moment that you normally wouldn't be able to do. A lot of people say, my God, I didn't feel like it, but you probably are doing better than you think because of that. But that's shock. And then after the shock, you reach a place where you're supposed to recalibrate. Say recalibrate. So you shock, and then you start feeling what I call the aftershock, where the adrenaline's gone, and now you start feeling the real pain. And it starts settling into you that, oh my Lord, we're going to have to be locked in our house together, alone for how long? I can't get out. I mean, it really starts settling in. You start feeling stir crazy, all that. Or you start feeling the pain of the divorce. You start feeling the loss of the loved one. Everybody's left. The funeral's over. You see what I'm saying? You feel the shock after the shock. Now you're feeling the real pain. So you're supposed to, so it's the shock. It's the shock after the shock where the real pain hits, and then you're supposed to recalibrate. That's where the resilience comes. You're supposed to recalibrate and pull yourself. So if I've got this bell curve, and instead of going down, you don't recalibrate. What happens is you continue to fall into a free fall. And that's where you get into the depths of depression, or what we call burnout. Burnout, we're going to see later, is called the canary in the mine shaft, because it's happening more than you would ever imagine right now. Once you totally get into burnout and you're falling off and you're there, it takes 2 to 4 to 6 years to pull out of burnout. So it's a tough place to get. You don't want to get there if you can help it. So you're supposed to recalibrate. And recalibrate is you pull yourself out of the free fall. And now what I just said is important. You pull yourself out. Say it. Pull yourself out. You got to pull yourself out. People can help you, but at the end of the day, you got to pull yourself out. This is where self-leadership, self-management, and as Christians modeling the way, self-control. We got help from the Holy Spirit. We're supposed to have, it's what the Bible says, we just don't do a good job taking hold of that and using it. So you take hold of yourself. You manage and lead yourself and say, I'm not staying here. I can come out of this. Now, and I'm going to get into this more. I just wanted to give you some insight into this because of what Matthew was talking to me about and you guys were talking to me about. Depending on your behavioral profile, you handle that recalibration differently. The D, which Kip is, and he was sharing with me how he does it, the D says, I ain't staying here, I'm pulling out. And here's what he said. He said, I get mad at it. Remember I said the high D, their number one emotion is what? Everybody heard that, didn't they? But listen, here's the bad thing. Most of us heard that in a bad way. I didn't mean that in a bad way. See how sick we are? That's the truth. Remember, I said when you saw your assessment, too many of you saw it and you felt like, I ain't going to that.
That's right.
How many of you would be honest that when you saw your assessment, you weren't real sure if you wanted to come to this or not? Okay, the rest of you are lying to yourself, but you're lying. Not necessarily, but I guarantee you there's more in this room that felt that than you would ever imagine. Because we are wired to see the negative. We all, and education institutes for so many years, and even our jobs, when they gave us assessments at our jobs, when the boss or the supervisor called us in, the first thing they started talking to us about was the weaknesses. Trying to help you with your weaknesses. Now we know from science, that that's exactly what you should not do. You should look at their strengths and try to cause them to fit into where they're good. Not where they're bad. Even Jesus went around finding people doing good and calling that out. He didn't go around popping people on the head saying, caught you. We should learn something from this, right? And so resilience is pulling out. But the D uses anger. Listen, what did the Bible say about anger? Be what? Be angry. Lord told us to be angry. But we are calibrated in our mental models, say anger is bad. Well, I have two favorite words in LeaderLABS that you all need to learn. And if you don't know these, you will not get a certificate. Anybody want to tell me what they are? If you've been through 10 essentials, you better shout it out. What are my two favorite words? Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that. Shanty, if you didn't get it, I was going to be really mad. What is it? It depends. Say it. Why? Because there are no cookie-cutter approaches to things today. You can't just go pull a book off and say, go do this. How do I get out of this? How do I recalibrate myself? It depends. But one of them is I use my strength. For a D, and he said this, Kip said this to me. My anger says, I'm not living like this. I'm getting out of this. And a D will pull themselves, they will recalibrate and begin to pull themselves out. You see this? Be angry, but be angry in the right way, at the right thing, at the right time, for the right reason. And use that anger in a positive way to do right things. Jesus got angry over the right things at the right moment, at the right time. And he used it appropriately. But when anger is used inappropriately, that's where you say, I dial that back. I got to learn to dial that D back. But here, I got to dial that D up. How many of you ever had a child that was extremely independent? Right? God bless your hearts. But let me tell you something. That same independence would be the thing that would cause that child to look at a drug dealer and say,
That's right.
If it's a little girl, a guy that's trying to get too fresh, she'll say, keep your hands off me.
That's right.
That independence creates some bad things, yeah, but it also has an upside that can be extremely positive. So we teach them to channel the strength. Am I right? So you've got to start looking at the yin and the yang. the good and the bad, and you manage the dysfunction, but you turn on your strength. The I-S, which we are. The I-S, and here's what we talked about here. Married, right? Here's a C, and here's an I. The opposites. He can obsess, and is it okay? See, I told you we'd talk about this stuff. This is counseling, and it's okay. It's free, by the way. But this is me charging for what we did at the table, all right? You got it. But he's a C, and he likes structure. But she's an I, and here's what she said. She said, I'm an I-S, and I'm a K-Sarah-Sarah. And he said, like this, right? And so the question is how, now watch this, the D and the C, they do the same thing. They recalibrate themselves, but for two different reasons. He's going to get mad at it and say, I'm not living like this, and he's going to pull himself out of it after a while, right? Shock of shocks is over, I'm recalibrating, and I'm moving on. And the anger is an impetus, a catalyst to pull out of that. The C, what do the D and the C have in common? They pour out of the same bucket, the task bucket. So the C, for a very different reason, says, I love my world when it's ordered and it's structured and everything's just so-so. And this chaos, I'm not living like this. And so he pulls himself out because he ain't living in chaos. You see what I'm saying? They recalibrate naturally. But the I-S, we have to recalibrate about every 4 to 6 days. And she says, yes, we do. You know why? And he even said this. He said, what can we do to help her? See what a C does? But he said it in a loving, kind way. What can we do to help? And listen, and she wanted to know too. So they had already had this conversation, right? And so he says, what can we do to help her? Because she's falling off the wagon about every 4 to 5 days. She can make her bed for about 3 days in a row. But then we stop. And I'm just using that as an example. I'm not, you know. And I said to her, I'm exactly the same way. I want to use my little book right here. This is crazy. But about every 5 to 7 days, I'll go a day that I didn't do this as disciplined. Still to this day, that I didn't do it as disciplined as I should. And what I have to do is speak to myself. I have to say to myself, you will not live in your natural K-Sarah-Sarah world. Get that little spiral binder and write down your ugly problem. Get with it. I have to say to myself. So, but watch this. My I is big time optimism, big time trust, right? And so I look at my optimism, got to recalibrate, and my I says, you ain't gonna live like this. My I says, this is gonna get better. Where a D and a C sometimes might say, I don't know, I don't want to live like this. It's looking pretty doggone bad, right? But I'm gonna try to pull out of it. I ain't living like this. But the I says, it ain't gonna be like this. I'm coming out of this, right? We believe that we can get out of it, but we still have to make ourselves do it. So it boils down to execution. Say execution. And making yourself do this constantly. And so for whatever reason, next month we'll get into that. So Matthew, thank you for causing me to go off on a tangent. But sometimes questions are good. Did everybody enjoy that little tangent? Is that helpful? Okay. Here we go. Now, what I want you to do with this is I want you to write down the 4, 5, 6 statistics that I say here. Darn. And core, chip, flop, in, finish. Now, right. Is it not working too good? I don't normally talk like that. Y'all are sick, I'm telling you. Okay, let's try it one more time. If it don't work, because we're using a little bit of wireless technology. If it don't work, I'm gonna keep teaching the way I teach. All right, let's try it one more time.